Welcome everyone to today's webinar, How to Navigate the Changing Healthcare Workforce and Empower Staff. I am Brian Zimmerman with Becker's Hospital Review. We'll begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We're looking forward to hearing your questions. We will also have a series of audience polling questions today during the webinar. When we reach each poll slide, the poll question will pop up automatically on your screen. Our speakers will give a few seconds for you to select an answer from the options on your screen and click Submit. Thank you in advance for your participation. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. At this time, it's now my pleasure to get things started by introducing our presenters. Kenneth Bauer is the Senior Director of Facilities at Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center. Mr. Bauer has more than 26 years' experience maintaining a unique, invigorating work environment that enables employees to focus on innovation while constantly searching for new ways to improve workplace efficiency and implement initiatives to impress and delight. Gary Maluski is the Corporate Manager of Facility Compliance at Novant Health. Gary Maluski has 30-plus years of professional experience in facilities management, safety management, disaster preparedness, and loss prevention. Gary is certified as a healthcare facility manager, healthcare safety professional, and a certified healthcare engineer. David Richardson is the healthcare implementation manager for Dude Solutions. As an expert in the field of healthcare facilities operations, he provides strategic insight into his clients' service offerings and helps them reach their asset management, capital planning, preventative maintenance, and productivity goals. His experience includes working with hundreds of different acute and senior living organizations, helping them improve their operations in maintenance, housekeeping, and other internal operations. And at this time, I'm pleased to turn the floor over to David to begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Brian. Really excited to be here today. And a big thank you to our two panelists, Ken and Gary, who will be joining us. And to start off, I just want to ask Ken and Gary to describe a little bit about the facilities they work with and the organizations that they're working with. And Ken, do you want to tell us about Our Lady of the Lake and the breadth of operations you have?
Sure. Our Lady of the Lake Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. 850 beds. We have over 450 providers that push a lot of business our way. Over 100 buildings, 5 million square feet. We have a freestanding children's hospital, 2 freestanding emergency rooms, several urgent cares, and I don't think I'd be able to manage any of that without my fantastic staff.
Thanks, Ken. And Gary, tell us about Novant, and you guys have a different sized operation.
We do. I'm working with 13 different hospitals, the largest one, 1,100 beds, multiple ambulatory surgical centers, 400-plus clinics, and actually, I don't know if people have noticed on the news lately or not, but we've working with Michael Jordan, who's contributed to a family clinic in our West Charlotte market, and I have a really great staff that I'm working with.
And that's great. Ken, how many maintenance people do you have on your staff?
Approximately 65.
Great. And Gary, you work with how many maintenance people on your team?
Over 400 plus.
So as you can see, we've got 2 very different sized hospitals, but 2 leaders that we work with as Dude Solutions in looking at how to manage staff and how technology can help impact the role that the staff members have. So some key topics that we're going to talk about today is the state of today's workforce, how that looks, the labor market that we're working within in healthcare, and some of the challenges that face us when we're trying to find people. What are the skill sets that we have in the healthcare market right now, and where are we kind of moving with the different generations that we have? What kinds of technology can help us retain the knowledge that we have as we have an aging workforce? And the last bit is kind of team interactions, how we can get our teams to work across generations because different people have different skill sets. So really overall what we're trying to achieve today is using the technology we have to elevate both your role as a leader, but also your team's work, and how we can really make sure that the facility staff have the tools they need to make sure that they're successful. And obviously at the end, we're really excited to answer any questions that you have about the topics that we're talking about today. So one of the first things we're going to do is a poll. We just kind of want to get into this, getting some interaction from you guys. So what is your organization's biggest concern with the changing workforce? There's 6 different answers here. The first thing being a looming wave of retiring baby boomers. I know that having some older facility staff is something that a lot of people are challenged with, and how do you bring in new staff when you have people who haven't retired yet and you need to grow the new staff before those experienced people leave? Training current employees in order to maintain the required technical skills. Training something that we've seen drop off a little over the last couple of years, and how do we bring that back? Getting everyone of different ages and skill levels to work well together. Finding and implementing new technology. Recruiting and retaining top employees, or all of the above, if that's something that you're having. Going to give you just a couple more seconds, and then we'll go from there. All right, so let's see where people are at. All of the above, a clear winner there, but recruiting and retaining top employees, I think that's something you're going to hear a lot about today. Some of the different things that both Ken and Gary have been doing to attract employees and also keep the ones that they've got. It's great to see that technology is not something that's, the finding of it maybe is not as big an issue, but obviously for everybody, all of these are an issue. So I think we're going to have some really great discussion here today. I think you're going to see a lot in there. So, going to start out today talking about the state of today's workforce. Just in terms of today's format, I'm going to be kind of giving some stats up front, really talking about the facilities market and where things are at, and then we're going to be getting into some details with Gary and Ken about their specific experiences in each of these. So what do we know about today's workforce? Well, across America, there's 7.6 million unfulfilled jobs, so there's only 6.5 million looking for work, and of that workforce, 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older by 2030. So there's going to be a huge exodus of knowledge and skills over the next 10 years. So my guess is, and just seeing the answers up above, how will I replace my soon-to-be retiring employees? How do I handle competition for skilled labor? And one of the things that we're certainly seeing there is the healthcare market versus the commercial market, where pay and benefits can be quite different. How will I learn the skills needed to grow my team's careers and do their best work? And how will my team learn new technologies? I think, especially with an aging workforce, bringing new technologies in has been a challenge for some organizations, with people, not wanting to kind of leave practices that they've used in the past, despite the changing needs of of compliance and all the other things in the market. So the big thing here is, with all of this change, there is some opportunities, and by working with this workforce, we're hoping that you can start to see some things that are really growing. So I'm going to start, Ken, with you. With your organization, what are some of the things that you're really doing to take on this challenge that you've got, and make this an opportunity for your organization to be a talent attractor, to kind of attract people and get that top tier workforce that you need?
We've been doing a lot of interviewing lately, and some of the common themes are, I want to find a place where I can grow and stick around for a little bit. The stability of the workplace is what I think a lot of people are looking for. I think Gary's going to talk about this a little bit too, but just have an ability of coming in, even if you're not skilled, having a good training program in place, giving them clear expectations, allowing them to have a great understanding of how they get from point A to point B in a facility, I think is a big thing to motivate them. I think Gary can probably add to that as well.
Yeah, and Gary, you've talked a little bit about that a little differently. You're looking at change in a different way from people who are careerists, from I'm expecting to be here 25, 30 years, to maybe this is a 3 to 5 job, but we still need to have trained people to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you're trying to do that? One, keep people on, but also, just changing the mindset within the organization for what does it mean to have a career path in a healthcare facilities area?
Well, sure. First of all, we've been competing with the commercial market where salaries are completely different, hours are different. You're not having the same exposures as you would in a commercial environment as you are in healthcare. But the other piece of it is that we've been in a position where you're hired, you're at a certain level, and there's really not been a good career path for anybody. And now with the mindset change and a younger generation coming in, it's a lot more of, what are you going to do for me? How can I grow within the organization? And so over the last year, we have been working on a plan to do just that, to where we have developed training classes similar to college level, 101, 201, 301, 401, where we're able to, one, bring the person in based on their presumed skill set. We would measure them for competency. If they're lacking certain things at that particular level, we would have programs available for them to take over a period of time to maintain that level. And then there are other opportunities if the person wants to grow within it to achieve certain other skill sets so that they can move up within the facility group. That's what we're doing internally. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about externally, kind of what we've been doing also in North Carolina.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
So we also, based on what we're seeing in the North Carolina area, where there is also, we're seeing this across all hospitals, a lack of trained folks coming into both technician positions as well as leadership positions. And so I've been working with the local community college to develop a program that would allow internet access for training to develop an associate's program in healthcare engineering that would then bring a different skill set to those individuals who are been working in a commercial market and moving into healthcare and seeing the differences in that. So we've been working with the local community college, and hopefully they'll be spread across all 58 community colleges at some point in North Carolina.
And that's amazing. I think that's such a good initiative. Ken, I know that you haven't had that kind of ability with your size to maybe grow that in the same way, but you've also kind of brought in some interesting training opportunities.
Yeah, so we certainly do have. We've had to actually develop a lot of our in-house training. So we have a thing called we're Catholic health organization, so we have a program over here where we have an individual that we've made basically our trainer. Some of the things we're looking out for those guys is consistency, right, and expectations, the same message over and over again, making sure we're communicating needs and biggest problem we have with our guys is when they're in a group, they won't say what they need and what they're short on. So we do a lot of one-on-ones with these folks, and again, it's just communicating their expectations.
And I think that's great that we're able to help with that, and both of your organizations are seeing the need and the rewards of investing in the individual, not just kind of in the infrastructure or capital side of things. So let's talk about the labor market and getting people into the organizations. What we know about today's labor market is that there is a projected 10 million shortfall of workers over the next 10 years. Now, this is across kind of all industries, but when we start to look at facilities personnel specifically, there's 50% of facilities personnel, because it is an older market, are set to retire in the next 10 years. So there's going to be a huge attraction to need to hire those facilities people. And Now, and that's without this, before we even get into the depth of this, right now we're looking at 93 days, the number of days required to fill a skilled worker, production worker. And if we even compare this to, 10 years ago or even, 6 or 7 years ago, there's a huge shift where it used to be, probably within a month you could have a number of applicants. Now you're looking at much longer to find the right people as the market's shifted quite dramatically. So part of the problem as this labor market ages out is a lot of organizations that we work with have historical knowledge rested in the people instead of within technology, within databases. So one of the risks that we run is losing that knowledge as the employees exit the team. We've seen a dropped investment in trade jobs. So you're hearing today 2 organizations that are trying to counter that stream, but we're certainly seeing a lack of specialty skills and needs like HVAC are rising. And part of that's also the college streams. There's a lot more people are going into kind of traditional college streams rather than into trade colleges. And the last part there is that contract work's getting more expensive because the contractors are feeling the same pinch. They need to also hire these sorts of skilled trades, and as you heard Gary say, we have to compete with the rates that they're willing to pay their workers. So they poach some of the talent that we're looking to have in the healthcare market to get into our teams. So I think what we really need to start looking at is using tools to do more with less. And, we hear about this all the time, and this isn't about, not hiring or hiring freezes. This is typically about the fact that we're going to have the ability with knowledge, with technology, with skills to actually use our workers in a higher way. They aren't just changing toilet seats and replacing light bulbs. We're going to have them be using technology to help manage the facilities that we work within. And to do that, we need to make sure we give them the tools they need and the education they need. So I think some of the things we're going to look around here is there's kind of 3 areas. The first one, though, I want to talk about is the documenting of work. Clients that we work with, oftentimes we come in and they have a lack of knowing what equipment they own, where their work order history is, safety manuals, utility use. A lot of these things are not handled digitally. There's binders behind someone's desk, and again, or it's in someone's head. So, Gary, I want to talk to you. How are you using software to help start to counter this, to make sure that knowledge is retained within the organization and not just within people?
Well, I think one of the challenges is, first of all, getting those seasoned individuals who are in the organization to relinquish that knowledge, and working more towards using iPads to where the technician is able to load up during the day. He has blueprints of the organization. He's then being able to map out the PM that he might be doing for that particular day. He gathers his resources for the day he goes out, is able to start doing those PMs without having to come back to the shop and close out a work order, let's say, and then, of course, you get into a conversation because there might be other people there. And so we're looking at having to do more with less. We've been able to take some of the day-to-day burden of things. During Joint Commission preparation, people are looking for many things like penetrations and all sorts of other things that are simple fixes but take time away from the technician doing the preventive maintenance. And what we've been able to do as part of this also is train 2 painters who are interested in advancing themselves, and they became a life safety strike team where they're going into each one of our facilities for a week or so and working on these simple fixes that can be taken care of right away, which allows then the technicians to continue doing their PM work. And staying up with technology, they're able to have a much better percentage of completion of their preventive maintenance in the month that is scheduled for.
And I think that's a really interesting idea that you guys came up with that kind of idea of a strike team, using people. In this case, you said it was 2 painters who you kind of gave the training and skills to go and do some of these things. So they weren't just doing their classic job of painting, but were able to take a larger role within the organization. And I think that's a great example of where we were talking about doing more with less, having people that you have with a certain skill set, expanding that skill set so that you can look at other things. Part of what we also look at is the ability to track and analyze. It's not just about getting the work documented, but then it's about actually using that information and using that to make sure that you're seeing what is and isn't completed. Are you staying on track? So by using mobile features, by having people not tied to a specific room, you can have your team get out. And Ken, I know this is something that you do with your organization. You have a very tight team with a large property. Mobile is a key aspect for you. How have you been using that?
Well, so we actually developed zones. And what's nice about this Works Hub that we use is we're able to upload task lists and checklists. So we can, everyone can go in there. Oh, I know how to do this, but if you really don't have some sort of accountability built into that to allow them to be able to go, okay, boom, 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 and then when you go do your reporting for EOC or for your binder review and joint commission, saying, yeah, we've hit every one of our fire extinguishers, we've hit every one of our exit signs, and you can just create this documentation becomes much more manageable. And you can see where you haven't been, right? So part of the tracking there is okay, where we're missing. And it also allows us to figure out what parts of the buildings are actually under more use or more abuse, right? So all of a sudden you get an awful lot of work orders that are hitting this area. Are we doing a good job on the checklist? And okay, what do we need to do to improve? So it also allows you to develop some of your continuous improvement processes as well.
And I think that's a really neat thing. Kind of, one of the things that the software allows, and that any kind of ability to do this sort of tracking, it's like being a doctor in this case, where you walk into an operating room, you've got a checklist that you follow. When you walk up to a chiller unit, it's the same thing. Did I do these things, and can I demonstrate that this work was done, so that when a compliance organization comes in, you're absolutely going to be able to have that. And, I think this is a question both of you have kind of, really taken the lead on. We've already talked a lot about training the team, but again, Ken, I'm going to go back to you on this one. One of the things you've done is kind of done mentorship pairing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, it's great. You've got an older guy that has been here forever, and you get some newer folks that come in, and they may have a kind of a rounded understanding of what they're supposed to be doing, but it really takes having that mentoring, the mentee and the mentor tie a good fit together to where they, the older folk maybe can figure out how to do this digital stuff, and then this younger guy that's just starting and very entry level into his career learn how to do things the right way, right? We can always figure out shortcuts, but there's always a right way to do stuff. So getting that fit and getting that marriage to work a little better going out through their careers. Again, communicating, having the ability to have those clear expectations from both ways, right? And I always think it works better as a team. Anyhow, we had tried at one time putting the I in team and going, okay, guys, here's your zone. You're by yourself. Good luck. But you find that you get really disconnected, not only amongst each other, but between leadership and the line level folks as well.
And I think that's sorry.
So
I think that's absolutely key.
Great teamwork. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that teamwork really leads into that sharing of skill sets. And I know one of the things that we're going to talk about in a few minutes is kind of the younger generation being digital natives versus a fear factor for that in the senior group or more experienced workers, and the experienced workers knowing exactly where to tap that machine with a hammer to make it work for the next 3 weeks, but not having that in the junior workers. So really trying to make sure that we have that. So what do we know about skill sets? Well, we know that across the country, there is a skills gap between where we're seeing people come into the roles, and this is especially in the technology side of things in the facilities market. We're seeing 108 million workers that hold jobs that require moderate or high digital knowledge, and this is growing every day. Where even 5 years ago, housekeepers and janitorial staff weren't having this, we're now seeing janitorial staff in schools, in senior living organizations, in hospitals be given digital equipment that they need to track, scan in, mark work done. So having some kind of digital knowledge is actually becoming more and more critical in industries and in professions that it was never an issue before. And 40%, and this is one of the numbers that really kind of surprised us as we saw these numbers. Only 40% say changing skills requirement will have the biggest impact on their job over the next 5 years. And in the facility space, I think people are often looking at that on the macro scale, like, well, a chiller's still a chiller the next 5 years. But I think where we're going to start to see, and I think we're seeing resistance, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, is there's resistance on some of these new technologies coming in, and not having that mindset that we have to be open to do that. And there's really 3 skill sets that we're looking at. So as we start looking at our teams and we start looking at our organizations, we have to kind of think about the 3 different skills. And the first skill is the technical skills. That's knowing how to fix the equipment that we've got, looking after the assets, being that HVAC expert or that plumbing expert. But the second set is that digital skills that I was just talking about. How do we make sure that our teams can actually use the technology that we're putting in place to run these things, where it may have taken 3 or 4 HVAC experts in the past to make sure your building's airflow was working correctly. You might now have that as a centralized computerized resource that they can check on their phone, reducing the number of staff you need with that expertise, but there's a higher level of expertise required there. And the final side is the soft skills, and I think this is probably one of the more overlooked skills that we see in the facilities side, and that is specifically because these are frontline staff. These people walk into patients' rooms, they walk into residents' rooms, they walk into, they interact with other staff, and there's a generational gap there as well, where you've got older staff who look at managing one way versus another. How do we make sure that that's happening? So let's talk about technical skills first. And Gary, I'm just going to kind of talk to you because obviously you started out talking about that college course that you have. How have you seen the take up, and how's that attracted staff to your organization?
Well, to the organization, I can't say specifically to the organization, but across the board, internally, I would say that what we're able to do with the technical skills is we've been taking and looking at each facility to where we find a technician who is well respected by their peers and that they have a certain skill set that we would like to tap into to help in as we're going through the training and levels of training within the organization that could help us where sometimes it's better received by their peer versus somebody else coming into the organization and teaching. And so that's one of the things with the technical skills that we're doing. But as far as the college event, we recognize that a lot of people don't have healthcare background, and we've also changed our philosophy internally. But to provide that link to healthcare that you do not normally get in a typical engineering program.
And I think that's really important that you have to kind of open up, not having healthcare experience, being able to train some of that in, I think is a really critical part. And Ken, I'm going to go to you on the digital side because one of the things that you've done is kind of the two-way mentorship, and I know you talked about the more experienced staff training those technical skills down, but also having the younger staff kind of open up. And make the digital skills more accessible for some of the people who may be a little bit more resistant to that.
Yeah, and I kind of touched on that on an earlier piece of that, and it's important to match up strengths, right? So if I'm really good at this, how can I get better? And sometimes you're just not going to teach an old dog a new trick, but with the help of the younger folks that go, hey, no, this is easy, this isn't hard, this is really. And I'm assuming it's an older person, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yep.
But I think part of our issue too is, and what's great about WorksHub is that the industry itself hasn't really kept up with all of our needs. And so we're forced to think of probably taking older ways of doing things and trying to digitize it. And so one of the things what's great about, again, WorksHub, because that's the product we're using here, is the fact that I can put in SOPs, right? I can put in, besides the checklists and besides the task lists, I can also put in this is an SOP. You've got to turn this off, do this, to loosen it, turn it to the left, to tighten it, turn it to the right. You can get very specific on a process too, which is great for uploading into a smartphone or an iPad or some sort of tablet, and it just creates a whole different world for even the tenured people to really go, wow, this is just nothing I had before. This is great. So it's been a lot of positive in creating a lot of the things we used to do either by memory or by taking a manual somewhere and uploading that into the digital side of things. And I think it also motivates those folks who aren't as digitally skilled to get into it more, because now there's information that they need or they want that's inside that a little bit, so they get better at it.
And I think that's really important, and I thanks for bringing that up. Is that there is a motivating factor when you're given something new, and obviously it's not for every single person, but across the board, as we've worked with organizations at Dude Solutions, that as we give people new tools and new techniques to do things, that can often be seen as a motivating factor to, hey, this is something I can do, this is something that can get better. And then finally, I think one of the things that's kind of, oh, sorry. Yes, Gary.
Hey, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one thing with the digital skills, is that it's changed the relationship between the facility manager and senior leadership to where they're able to provide a new set of data points to make their case if they need to replace equipment or things like that, where in the past you were competing with medical equipment. The relationship is changing, being able to provide that data information in those pieces so that leadership can finally see what the issues are with the facility in some cases.
And I think you're absolutely right, Gary. Having the ability to be able to make those cases, I was at a presentation once, and the line with the CFO was, "I don't care about your feelings," and he wasn't meaning that he doesn't care about you personally, but if you go to him and say, "I feel that we need a new chiller unit on the roof," that doesn't get you a new chiller unit. You need to go with, here's the number of times we've repaired this unit, here's the cost of repairs to date, and here's why we should have a new chiller unit. And that's how he needed to be to work with. And so having a way to track that, maintain that, so you're not going in with the I feels, but you are going in with the here's the data, we can make a data-driven decision, is something that's relatively new to the facilities world. And I think that's a really great point. Thanks for bringing that up. In terms of the soft skills and in terms of looking after the soft skills, this is a place where we've seen, again, a bit of a lack of training and a bit of a lack of appreciation for the amount of time that our facility staff spend in front of the rest of our staff and in front of our residents and with each other. This is, being able to communicate cross-generationally, cross-professionally, and having the ability to truly listen to what's going on. It's kind of like, when you go and talk to your IT department and they're like, turn it on and off again. It's the same thing with the facilities team, where it's like, sometimes a lack of understanding can drive this. So, just very quickly, and Gary, I'm going to turn to you. Soft skills are something that you absolutely kind of talk about in terms of the culture at Novant and making sure that when you go into a room, they have the right skills. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So what we try to do in part of the training program, and it's not just for the techs, but it's for everybody in, in the facilities group, is to make sure they understand that they are an integral part of the patient care experience. And when they're entering the patient's room, that we ask them to knock on the door, introduce themselves, explain what they're wanting to do, ask for permission if they can do that, and then kind of keep the patient informed as to how much longer they're going to possibly be in the room. And then before leaving, ask the patient if, in fact, there's anything else that they can do for that patient. And if it's the patient's requesting something, to make sure they get it to the nursing group, and then come back to that patient to explain that they've passed that message on to the nursing group to try and tie that piece together. And it's important because I think everybody's beginning to understand more and more with the culture of our organization that these activities are tied directly to depressed Gini scores and eventually reimbursement. That we all know that if there's a bad patient experience with one activity, it could have an impact across the entire stay of that patient. So this is a real critical part of our training for everybody within the facility group.
We actually have that written on our mirror as you leave the plant office. We got it down to smaller words, but it's called Aid It, and we actually have that in there. And everyone walking through there, that's their last look in their uniform. Make sure their uniform looks good before they walk out. It's kind of in a shadow and a smoke on the mirror.
And that's really great, the fact that you even have that mirror, the fact that your team wants to be the professionals that's there. No, and I think that's a critical part is, it's not the, oil-stained uniform walking through. It's
right.
We're a professional group, we are a professional set, and seeing them and changing that dynamic within the organization of these are skilled professionals doing skilled work in a very critical function that our organization needs.
I think part of the soft skills too, just to add, is having some more leadership. So you've got like listening, critical thinking, communication. So having more touch points with leadership, not necessarily the line level leader, but the manager or the director, and having regular talks and touches with those individuals to make sure that they understand things, they're appreciated. They're just pushed down the right road, right path, so they don't. It also keeps them on path and on track.
Absolutely. Where we're going to move to next is the technology side of things. This is, part of how we're seeing as an organization at Dude, where we're seeing a lot of things done. And number one is that 95% of organizations agree that a digital workplace is important. I'm always surprised when I start to see this in a healthcare space. I'm like, where are those 5% saying that this is not working? But obviously that's still out there. But a critical part is getting digitized, keeping that knowledge. 73% of organizations are saying that 80% plus of their apps will be serviced as a software or cloud-based by 2020. So really not having to hold the infrastructure internally, but being able to rely on partners and technology partners to do that. And finally, 45% of organizations report improved customer satisfaction as a result of a digital workplace. And to me, I think this number is probably underreported. I think that as we look at where technology impacts, and as you listen to where Gary and Ken today have been talking about how their teams can use this to better improve the patient experience, can use different parts of the organization to make sure that they are doing this, I think we're going to see this number climb quite quickly. Just to tell you a little bit about us, we're a 12,000 client strong, $2.8 million solution that applies across the healthcare market. And we also work in other verticals, including education, government, and manufacturing as well. We have a lot of expertise in this. And so when we come and we start to see trends across industries, and when we're able to work with experts like Gary and Ken, it's really exciting for us to see that, the information that we're getting out of us is the same experience that they're having, and we're able to bring that to you guys, so that hopefully this is a great way that you can see how some industry leaders are managing this. What we see with people who move to a CMMS is, and we've heard this a lot from Gary and Ken already today, time savings. Their teams are out with mobile devices, so they're not having to walk back. They can stay in their zones. Organized workflows, again, having those SOPs in the software means that you know what's going on and you've got the right thing and you've got the right customer service happening. We can do more strategic capital planning, as we just heard, and the detail reporting, having the numbers at your fingers. So instead of driving through binders and binders trying to get the data, when someone walks in, you've got the numbers at your fingertips with easy reports. So what we see there is the real challenge is embracing that technology. Facilities can be a little bit behind in some cases, trying to embrace new features. They're like, hey, a chiller's a chiller, a pump's a pump, but it's not just about the actual technical side of things. It's about the recording and reporting and all the things we need to do for our compliance and to make sure that our patients have a great experience. So getting those new skills and how to encourage those new skills is absolutely something that we have to look at. So one of the things that, I think we've heard already is, being able to pair people and highlighting the benefits about what we're trying to do here. Earlier involvement and the buy-in means that your team's going to see the benefit for them. It's not just, oh, you're bringing this in to fire me. It's, no, you're going to bring this in and train me. I'm going to be better, and the organization's going to be better to have this. Ken, when you brought the WorksHub on in your organization, what were some of the things you did to kind of get the team engaged, and how did you bring in a champion for yourself?
Well, we understood that our older system wasn't giving us good reporting. It wasn't giving us things that aligned with healthcare, with the Joint Commission and elements of performance. So we understood we had to put some resources in this. So we actually ended up with a couple of champions, and we kind of broke it out to where we had supervisors who were focused on making sure the guys were using the iPads on a regular basis, make sure they're putting hours in, making sure they were completing their PMs. Part of it was getting them to help develop some of the task lists, some of the checklists, some of the assets, help with the asset management. And the biggest thing that we had to is, the mindset was, well, it's the flavor of the month. We'll just skate on this until it rolls off. Because some of the things we've made mistakes in the past is we kind of drive things out and then we kind of step back and let it happen. And it doesn't work that way. You've got to have daily pushes. You have to every day talk about it every day. This is it. This is your new tool. This is your new screwdriver. This iPad's going to be part of you wherever you go, because you're starting timers, stopping timers in every bit of your life. So it had to be something you had to break down their mental, their natural blockade that they have for anything new, any kind of change, and make them all change agents to where they like I said earlier, having all that cool information in there that they always like, right? You've got the OEM manuals in there. They've had the buy-ins by creating the checklist. They help create some of the SOPs, so that's having smaller groups and sitting down and, okay, how do we and treating everyone like they're equals, right? You just can't get all the information and say, okay, well, I'm just going to trump that because this is the way I want it done, right? Typical leader. So it's about letting them feel it, and own it, and it's part of them. It's they've got their name on the end result, right? And of course, the champion. Again, you've got two things, right? You got someone working the people, and then you've got someone making sure that the data on the other end is making sense and making adjustments and pushing those adjustments. And okay, that checklist doesn't work, or it's in with the wrong asset. We had a baler, a cardboard baler over here, and the checklist that was attached to it was for an air handler. Well, obviously that someone dropped that in there accidentally, so someone has to look at that data until. We're working it down to where now it's not 100% of our time, but it's been to get it perfect. It takes time. It takes months. So we're in a much better place than we were a year ago, as far as what I can produce for reports, what I can produce for. Gary had commented earlier about creating justifications and for capital expenses. We're an expense account. We're not a revenue generating department. So our job is to maintain. Anything over that, it takes a little work. You got to definitely there's got to be a change in how we speak to leadership.
And I think that's really important. And Gary, I know you've kind of touched on this a lot today in terms of the providing ongoing training, but maybe you can just talk about how you got the executive buy-in to really kind of to provide this. This isn't something that a lot of organizations look at and go, yes, we're going to invest into working with colleges and doing this. What was some of the techniques you used to get that buy-in from your executive team to get the resources that you did get?
Well, fortunately, we have a vice president of facilities who understands technology and is all in favor of doing more with less. So that was one of the first hurdles that we were able to do, which was great. And then we also have a dedicated person who handles our data entry for this. So that made it a little bit easier. And then what we decided to do, instead of trying to roll this out to the entire organization at one time, which we did a previous system, which was a complete failure, is that we looked at one of our facilities who would be a champion to be able to take this information and is willing to jump in there and do what needs to be done, and started with that facility. So we were able to kind of make our mistakes along the way, get everything worked out there, and then made it easier to go from facility to facility. And again, like I said, having a leader who is already on board with this has made this a lot easier transition for us.
And I think that's a key part. This does come from leadership. We need to make sure that the leaders in our organizations are the ones driving this. The teams can ask for it all they want, but unless you get the support from senior leadership, it's very hard to make those critical shifts in your organization. So the final thing we're going to talk about is the state of teams that we have. As we've talked about throughout this, we've got different generations on our teams. We've got different levels of skills on our teams. So what do we know about today's teams? Well, we know that 25% of the workforce will be made up of Gen Z by 2022. We know that ages 21 to 25 are where mentoring really appeals. These are the young workers coming in and they want to know how to create a career. And so you've heard Gary talk about some of the training that they're offering, as well as Ken's one-on-one mentoring with older employees as well. And going back to Gary, also the career pathing, so they can see that there's a future in the organization. And one of the things that we also see is 86% of employees cite poor communication for work-based failure. If you're going to be bringing in technology to help them, make sure that they understand the reasons. This isn't about, and unless it is, but, in many cases, this isn't about reducing staff. It's about, limiting staff growth. It's about improving the experience that we're offering. It's about getting better patient results, resident happiness, whatever it is that you're working on. You need to make sure that we're getting the right communication so your staff knows why changes are happening, and that's one of the reasons that some of these things don't work. What are causing frictions between the generations? Well, different levels of career experience. You've got someone who's like, I've been doing this for 30 years, and here's some guy who's 25, he's come in, he's got no work experience, but he thinks he's going to own the place next week. And where they're seeing is, different things and different skill sets. So while the more experienced employee may be great at the technical stuff, they may be light on digital, maybe light on the soft skills, which is a stronger set of skills that the younger generation seems to have inherently, where they don't have some of the technical skills or just the experience to be able to identify easily some of the issues that they're having. Tenures with employers. I've been here 20 years. I should be the one who gets preference. And that's really not the way we're seeing things going. And I think it's okay to have that, but you're going to see frustrations. It really is turning into more of a merit-based rather than, a tenure-based advancements as we start working with different organizations. Different comfort levels with technology. Again, not to say that this is a ubiquitous statement, but certainly technology adoption is slower amongst older older employees than amongst younger employees who expect that their work is done on a cell phone or done on a tablet, and different communication styles. How you talk to someone who's a baby boomer or in Gen X is going to be very different than a millennial or a Gen Z. They want to be talked to differently. They want to have a different approach. So even just how you have a meeting, one message may land very well with half the room and not land at all with the other half of the room. So just how we're going to do that. So just final thing that we're going to look at today is kind of how we're going to be, working cross-generationally and seeing how they're more alike than different. The first being finding common ground. How can we be successful? What can we do to be heard and collaborate and build team morale? And Ken, I know this is something that you've done on your team is really try and, you talked a little bit about the beginning of, where, in a group setting, you've got people and they kind of stand off. They don't want to lose their street cred. But one-on-one, you can get a very different response. So maybe you can talk a little bit about finding ground and finding that one-on-one relationship and how that can influence the overall performance of your team.
Yeah, so being a facility where we're trying to continuously improve our processes, our end results, and asking for buy-in in group meetings, just typically it's when leadership isn't in the room, it's they act differently than when leadership walks into a room. But we found taking them aside and having our we call it student rounding, but it's really a one-on-one to see how they're doing, making sure they have the tools and things they need, and you really end up. We've expanded that too, by the way, to actually look through the Works Hub and see how they're doing as far as all the expectations, and so we do have our one-on-ones just to ensure that we're still on track with the expectations. We ask them if there's any rumors going about. But that one-on-one is so important, and leaders just have to put it in their day-to-day. And I'm talking leaders. I'm talking, more than your line level supervisors, but I mean the directors and the managers. They've got to spend time to understand these guys. You also find some really silly things why they don't talk or get along. But at the end of the day, they respect you a lot better. They start understanding things a little better. I think they want to come to work, right? So there's your morale, there's your motivation, there's your desire to even be and they're always asking, right? Hey, when can I be? What's up? What's next? What's the new open position? And when you start hearing that, then you know you've got some people who want to stick around. So what we have a difficult time, and I think Gary actually has a different result, is our HR hasn't really developed a good succession plan or a good way of a guy coming in and with the very beginning and going, okay, now what do I got to do besides come to work every day to collect my paycheck? But what else do I have to do to move up, right? So they come in green, they don't know anything. We train them this. They know how to do mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So they get all their MEP skills. They start doing this, and then now what, right? Do they leave, or do you offer them more money? What's the piece? But you get into bigger organizations, and they're pretty cut and dry what happens, right? If there's not a spot open, you're not going to get there. So
that career path is really critical. It's
correct.
Something that is. Yeah, and I think, Gary talked a lot about that, and I think that, having the strengths on your team, and you, Ken, you've talked about the mentoring and the one-on-one between team players and also the one-on-one between the leadership. I think the final thing that we're talking about here is that mentorship is, if we're going to see people grow, if we want people to stay on our teams, they have to feel valued. They have to feel that they're going to, be able to do that. So whether it's one-on-one mentorship and Gary, kind of final comments here from you. Anything around that kind of team building mentorship that you want to throw out there?
No, I mean, I think that we've talked quite a bit about it, and being in the position that I'm in now, also it allows me to do a lot of that mentorship. And you kind of look at it. People say, well, if I'm only training 3 to 5 years, and then they're going to leave, what's the point in doing this? But then on the other hand, if you're not doing the training, what is the point of keeping somebody who's untrained in the organization, and what benefit are you actually receiving from that? So it's just got to be a different mindset and a different way of approaching people and reinforcing their worth to the organization, whether it's complimenting, doing simple things of, providing lunch one day, doing more lunch and learn, whatever it might be, just to make sure people understand what their worth is. So I think that's part of the key piece of mentorship as well.
Yeah, and there's that kind of famous Richard Branson quote where he was talking with his CFO, and the CFO says, "What happens if we train these people and they leave?" And Richard says, "Well, what happens if we don't train them and we stay and they stay?" I think that really kind of embraces that feel that both of your organizations are looking at around getting your teams working together and making sure that they've got the tools and skills that they need to succeed in a new digital age. So what's the bottom line? What we're seeing is, across the board, what you're doing is going to influence your industry in terms of how you're training the skill sets in healthcare. What we're looking at is the tools and future-proofing as we start to lose that expertise, getting the knowledge, the institutional knowledge digitized and recorded so that anybody who comes on starts to have access to that and records it in a place where anybody else coming on will have access to that as well. And part of what we really, I think you can see the pride that both Gary and Ken have in their organizations is that as this works, the legacy they're building with their teams, the fact that the organization is set up for success for many years to come because of that knowledge that they've built and the teams and the structures that they have. So I really want to thank both Gary and Ken for their expertise and their willingness to join us today to share some of their experiences. We're going to leave everyone with a final poll question before we get into the questions. So just wondering where people are looking for help in the industry. And obviously, we've got some industry leaders here, but, and at the Dude, we've got a lot of experts as well. So, where is it? Is it about choosing the right software mix to make sure they've got the right tools? Is it about having knowledge, keeping your knowledge and retaining your knowledge as your staff turns over? Is it giving that capital plan and how are you going to, be able to share information from your departments up to make sure that you're getting the right equipment, and you've heard about that today, or the support they need to work through new technology change management. One of the things that, we've come at a number of different angles today is adopting new technology and adopting these things can be a huge impact on your team, and being able to use that mentorship and have that training in place and the communication can be really critical. So quickly look at the answers, and then we're going to turn over to Brian in the Q&A. So we can see here the right software mix isn't the issue. All of the above is obviously, it sounds like we have a bunch of people on here that this was a great conversation for. So again, thank you, Gary and Ken, for this. But, retaining your knowledge as your staff turns over and providing the team the support they need to work through new technology change management, two critical areas, something that is really important as you adopt new processes and encourage people through. So moving into the Q&A, I think there's some questions here. And if you do have questions, Brian, maybe you can jump on and just remind people how to add questions into the Q&A section.
Absolutely, David. And thank you for that great presentation, and thank you to Gary and Kenneth as well. And we will now begin today's question and answer session. So please submit any questions you have by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your dashboard. And we'll try to get through as many as we can. So the first question I'm going to throw at you, David, is what tips do you have for providing my team the support they need to work through technology change management?
I think that's a couple of things. Number one is, and we talked about this, and you heard this from both Ken and Gary, is the communication that happens throughout. If you don't explain why we're going through the change, if we don't have the champions and the people who are going to do this, I think that's part of it. Choosing a good technology partner as you work through that, someone who has done it before, is obviously critical. And Ken, maybe I can throw this one to you. Obviously, as someone who's still in the process of adopting the software, what's some of the tips that you have?
Have two good contacts with IT, because one inevitably is going to be busy doing something else.
And I think that's a great one. Gary, anything on your side around, you talked about, not rolling it out to all your sites at once. You're in a large chain at Novant with lots of different buildings, starting one, proving the concept, and then getting that expertise rolled out. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Well, again, I think because of the leadership's involvement in understanding where we're going and that support and making sure the leaders in each facility understand that, sharing the information is actually going to help you overall versus trying to retain it and not share everything, feeling that you would then be moved out of the organization is really not the case, but just strengthens what you're doing. So I think those are key pieces.
That was a great question. Thank you, Brian.
Great. And David, my next question here I have from an attendee is, what are some best practices I can implement with my team when it comes to getting and documenting historical knowledge from employees?
I'm going to turn this one over to Ken. Ken, I know you've done a lot to try and get the buy-in from your team so that they are absolutely, sharing that information. How do you do that?
I made them teachers. I asked them to put together. I'm fortunate to have a good. I have a coordinator here who's got some educational experience and teaching experience. So I teamed her up with some of the older guys that have been here and knew where all the bodies were buried. And I would ask them she would put together a little template for them to fill out, and then we would look at it, review it, and then we go, okay, well, let's supplement that with some plans, right? So then we sort of like water connection valves. I mean, we've got three different generations of buildings that we built and a lot of changes. So they were water's our worst friend. So getting him to get that down on some sort of a document, holding the plans, making him a teacher. Okay, now show these guys how this is fed. Let's talk through it. And we did this in small group environments, like 4 or 5 guys, and it was very successful. It gave him a little pride in giving that information up. But he was hesitant at first because he really felt like when he gave up that information, he somehow was considered expendable. 30, 40 years into the business, and so he was concerned he was going to be let go. But I think he turned around once he felt a little more pride in what he was teaching.
And I think that's a really great way of looking at that. Brian, I think there's 2 more questions.
Yep, we've got a couple more. So the next question is, are you doing this training in an online format or bringing them to a classroom?
So I'm going to take this from a technology side. There's a wide range of ways we can do this. I think we heard from Gary, who started with a kind of a college classes and then moved to an online format. As a technology partner to both Gary and Ken, we offer both sides. We can send people on site to do training. We offer online virtual training. When you're doing it with your own teams, obviously that's going to be in person. So different types of trainings call for different things, and obviously you want to make sure you've got the right mix. Some kind of in-person training where that's required, virtual training and accessible training for people throughout a time span, because we work in 24-hour operations, so it's not just about, hey, do I have to show up midday when I'm supposed to be on the night shift, but it's, hey, I can do this during when I need. The last question there, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. So this attendee asks, I have a maintenance director who's resistant to adopting new technologies. What are some strategies you employ to make sure that implementing new programs goes smoothly?
And Gary, I'm going to throw this to you. I know you've kind of got 13 different organizations with differing levels of enthusiasm for implementing new softwares. What are some of the things that you've done to overcome that?
Well, overcome it, and then the reality of it sets in to where, one, we try to one-on-one work with that individual that is resistant to it, trying to work through showing the improvements that could be made, the more efficiency, the opportunities to have a better working relationship with the leadership group. And then it finally gets to a point where, again, because we have leadership on board and they're looking at how the train is moving, sometimes it comes down to having that conversation, not necessarily that person, but leadership having the conversation with that individual to basically say, you know, either you're getting on board with the train or maybe you need to find a different career path at this point in your life. And that's kind of the reality of it, to be honest with you.
And I think that's really key is, you know, showing the benefits, talking with them, making sure that they understand, but also realizing that you have a business to run. You know, one of the things we look at is the difference between teams and families, and we have to run teams. You know, if you have a baseball team and, you know, Uncle Larry's at first base and terrible at it, that's not someone who you're then going to, you know, move around the field. You're going to, you know, that's a family culture. You're going to, you know, if someone's bad at batting, you get them batting practice, and if they're still bad at batting, then there's a trade that's going to happen. So really want to thank, again, Ken and Gary, thank you for all of your input today. I know I got a lot out of it, and I hope everyone else on the call did as well. More than happy myself to receive questions or, you know, pass them through, and looking forward to talking to people in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. And on behalf of Becker's, I want to thank you, Gary, and Kenneth for joining us today, and for Dude Solutions for sponsoring today's webinar. We hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.